I, a 27-year-old man, am engaged to a 26-year-old woman, Ava. My father, who is 52, and my mother, who is 50. It's a cliché, but I never thought I would be in this kind of situation. I've never used a forum before, but I've seen some stories from here on TikTok, so I figured I'd give it a try and see if anyone has any advice for me. I've heard that giving some backstory is helpful, so I'll do my best to give you a detailed account. It's only been a week since everything happened, so forgive me if I start to lose my cool during the telling. To begin with, Ava and I met when she was a freshman in college. We both lived in the same dorm building, which is how we eventually crossed paths. We eventually discovered that we lived just 2 towns away from each other, so I started giving Ava a lift home whenever we went back for the weekend. It only added an extra 20 minutes to my journey, so it was no trouble at all. After several trips and spending more time together on campus, we began dating. We both come from tight-knit families, so we didn't wait long to introduce each other to our respective families. I had met Ava's family a few times when dropping her off, but it was just brief greetings and small talk. Both of our families accepted each other with open arms, and our relationship continued to flourish. When I graduated a year ahead of her, I was offered a great job back home with excellent pay. Despite the distance, I visited Ava at school whenever I could, and when she came home, we made time for each other. After she graduated, she moved in with me, as both of our jobs were located in the city where we grew up. Ava was even offered a position at her current company with excellent pay, just like me. 3 years into our cohabitation, I finally popped the question to my fiancée, Ava, and she said, yes, we've been busy planning our dream wedding ever since, but I know what you're all really here for. As I think back on it, there were so many things that I overlooked about my ex and my father's relationship. At the time, I just dismissed them, thinking my dad was simply trying to make my ex feel welcomed into our family. But now it all seems so obvious. My dad would call her all the time, and if I was around, they'd tell me they were discussing something innocent, like an upcoming family party. But one time, while Ava was taking a shower, her phone rang and it was my dad. Without thinking, I answered it. When he realized it was me, he sounded both upset and surprised. He told me he wanted to talk to Ava about my mother's upcoming birthday, and after a brief conversation, we ended the call. Looking back on it now, I feel like a complete idiot for not seeing the truth sooner. As I recall that day, it started like any other day with my fiancée Ava having Thursdays off, so she made breakfast for us. I remember leaving for work after she gave me a kiss and wished me a great day. During my drive to work, I realized I had forgotten some important paperwork that I needed for a meeting scheduled at 3 p.m. I tried to shake off the thought, telling myself that I would go home at lunch to get it. Ava texted me throughout the day, and we had our usual conversation about mundane things that couples talk about, like what to have for dinner, laundry, and other things. I didn't feel the need to tell her that I was coming home for lunch to get the paperwork, so when lunchtime came around, I just left work and went home. As I pulled into the parking lot, I couldn't help but notice a car that looked eerily similar to my father's parked in our spot. However, I didn't think much of it and shrugged it off as a coincidence. As I opened the door to our apartment, I walked in on a scene straight out of a cheesy Hollywood movie. A man coming home unexpectedly and catching his partner in the act of infidelity. It felt like a bad dream that I couldn't shake off. As I entered my apartment, I noticed a trail of clothes leading to my bedroom, and the sound of faint moans echoed through the hallway. My heart raced as I realized what was happening, but I couldn't believe it. I followed the trail of clothes to my bedroom, and there, in the midst of it all, was my father and Ava. They both froze when they saw me, and my brain was in a mix of emotions: rage, sadness, disgust. I was like a statue, unable to move or say anything. As soon as I regained my senses, I pulled out my phone and started recording everything. I gathered up all the clothes that were scattered on the floor and chucked them into the hallway of the building. Then, with my camera rolling, I made my way towards my bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, so I stood in the doorway and filmed for about a minute before turning on the lights. As soon as the lights came on, they both jumped and my eyes widened in shock as I saw my father lying in bed with her. It was like a gut punch, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My father immediately noticed that I was recording and started to panic, frantically searching for something to cover himself while urging me to stop recording. He scrambled to find something to cover himself and grabbed a towel, then walked towards me. I warned him to stay away, but he kept coming and reached for my phone. Without thinking, I swung a fist and landed a solid hit on his jaw, causing his head to bounce off the door before he collapsed to the floor. Ava let out a piercing shriek as I turned the camera on her and asked why she had nothing to say to her fiancé while she was busy with her ducking buddy. After my father woke up from his knockout, I made it clear to them that I was only there to pick up something for work and threatened to send the video to everyone they knew if they were still there when I returned. Ending the video, I turned to my father, who was still coming to, and he told him he was dead to me and no longer my father. However, I suggested that he should go home and talk to my mom, because I would be talking to her very soon. As I sat in my car, my mind was in a haze. It felt like a bad dream, but the truth was undeniable. My phone buzzed. It was one of my bosses asking where I was. I lied and told her I was on my way back to work. When I arrived, I walked into her office and handed her the paperwork. She took one look at me and knew something was off. I tried to play it cool, but she wasn't having it. She asked me what was going on, and I brushed it off, saying it was just a bad morning. But then she noticed the blood on my collar and freaked out, rushing over to me to see if I was okay. I glanced down at my bloodied collar and muttered that it was my father's. My boss, clearly confused, pressed for more information, so I pulled out my phone and showed her the damning video. She watched in stunned silence, recognizing my fiancée Ava from a few casual introductions, but not my own father. After a long moment, the realization hit her that Ava had been cheating on me, and with my own father no less. She asked if there was anything she could do, suggesting that I take some time off work, but I knew I couldn't just run away from this. I just needed a moment to compose myself and change my shirt before the meeting. I had a spare shirt in my office, so I was good to go. During the meeting, I put on a facade of normalcy, pretending like nothing was wrong. After the meeting, my boss approached me and asked how I managed to keep it together. I shrugged and replied with a simple, "I don't know," before heading back to my office. When I finally came home, it was the first time in a long time that I was alone with my thoughts. After posting the video, I tried to reach my mother, but couldn't get through. I wanted to talk to her in person and share everything. Frustrated with the calls not going through, I got into my car and drove to her house. I knew she had to know what happened, even if it meant reopening the wounds. As I drove, my mind raced with the words I would use to tell my mother about the affair. The thought of it made me so sick to my stomach that I had to pull over twice just to vomit. It's not an easy thing to tell your own mother that her husband is cheating on you with your fiancé. I pulled my car into the driveway and sat there for a moment, trying to calm down and gather my thoughts. Before facing my mother, just as I started to feel like I had it together, my mother burst out of the front door, yelling and cursing at me. She accused me of hitting my father for trying to break up a fight between Ava and I. My mother continued to hurl insults and accusations at me, branding me an offender and telling me to leave. According to her, Ava wasn't ready to forgive me yet, and if she had any sense, she never would. The shock of it all left me numb. It turned out that my father had taken Ava to my family's home and spun a tale that we had an argument, and when he tried to intervene, I hit him. She then slammed her phone down and looked up at me, but I turned on my heels and walked back to my car. As I backed out of her driveway, I glanced at her through my rearview mirror and saw tears streaming down her face. A part of me wanted to comfort her, but too much had been said and done during that argument for me to just forgive and forget. As soon as I walked into my apartment, I knew I had to get rid of anything that reminded me of Ava or my family. I gathered all of Ava's belongings and packed them up neatly, stacking the boxes by the front door. Legally, she had been living with me, so I couldn't simply throw her out. However, her name was not on the lease, and I knew she would avoid conflict at all costs. If she ever came back, I was ready to confront her. I gathered up every single thing that reminded me of my parents and boxed them up, tossing them into storage. Despite being a close-knit family, I'm not one to hold on to toxic people, so I let go of everything that connected me to them. Feeling empowered, I sent a text message to Ava's parents and ended my engagement with their daughter. I informed them about her infidelity, that she had been cheating on me all along. It wasn't easy to do, but I had to be honest with them. After texting Ava's parents about the cheating and calling off the engagement, I thanked them for their kindness and support during our relationship. However, this painful experience added another layer of hurt to everything. As a final request, I asked them to come and collect all of Ava's belongings. Despite sending the message, I haven't received a response from them yet. I'm hopeful they will come soon to take her things, so she won't have any reason to return to my place. Story 2. My world has turned topsy-turvy, and I feel like I'm living in a distorted reality. I wish I knew how to turn back time and go back to my normal life. It all started during Thanksgiving. You see, in my house, Thanksgiving is one of the rare occasions when I can just chill out and have a drink or two. So I got a bit buzzed, but my wife went completely overboard and got completely wasted. As we were finishing up our dinner, I was scrubbing away at the dirty dishes when my wife stumbled into the kitchen. Her eyes were red and puffy, and tears were streaming down her face. I could barely make out what she was saying through her slurred speech, but all I could gather was, "I'm sorry." I led her to the bedroom, got her a glass of water, and gently laid her down on the bed. That was the day I started wondering what was going on with her. Then, in early December, I left work early due to a nasty fall and headed home. As I approached my driveway, I was taken aback by the sight of a mysterious car parked there. It wasn't a familiar car either. It was a 2003 Dodge Durango, a car I hadn't seen since one of my buddies crashed his back in 2005 at a house party. As I unlocked the front door and stepped into the house, I immediately noticed my wife on the couch with a glass of wine in hand. She leaped up to greet me with a giant hug, but my eyes were drawn to the unfamiliar car parked in the driveway. I asked her about it, and she casually replied that it belonged to a girlfriend. Suspicious, I probed further, and she explained that her friend was taking a shower because she had spilled wine on herself. It all seemed a little too convenient, and my gut told me that something was off. I wasn't buying her story, not for a second. My gut was telling me that something was off, so I pressed her again, and she just stuck to her original story. That's when a light bulb went off in my head. I decided to try a little trickery, and I simply sat down and said, "I already know, that's why I came home early." My buddies and I used to play poker all the time, and I was known for having a poker face. And that skill came in handy in this situation as well. Her expression went from fear to pure shock when I revealed that I already knew what was going on. She stammered, "Know what?" And I calmly replied that I knew about her affair. I could see the weight of her guilt beginning to show on her face. She began to apologize profusely, admitting that she hadn't been true to herself and needed to be honest. Just as she was in the midst of her confession, the other woman emerged from the bathroom. It was like a scene straight out of a movie, the dramatic reveal that confirmed all of my suspicions. As soon as the other woman saw me, she froze and then quickly sat down beside my wife, holding her hand tightly. I realized then that my poker face wasn't good enough to hide the truth. My wife looked at me with a sad expression and said, "I'm sorry you had to find out like this, but I can't keep pretending and wasting my life like this." Crap. This part makes me feel like a sissy. A storm of emotions hit me like a ton of bricks. Shock, disrespect, sadness. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably, but I refused to break down completely. The other woman, frozen in place, refused to leave when I demanded it. I'm not one for violence or aggression, but in a fit of anger, I hurled my coffee table across the living room, narrowly missing the dining table. The woman looked terrified, and I calmly, almost sociopathically, told her to get out. She still hesitated, but my wife finally stepped in and pushed her out the door. As she came back in, my head was spinning. She started spewing apologies and meaningless words like, "You're my best friend," and "I still love you." My back was throbbing from the pain of the fall and hitting the coffee table. I collapsed onto the ottoman and let out a groan of pain. I pushed my wife away when she tried to comfort me, unable to bear her touch. She retreated to the bedroom, and I stayed there on the ottoman, exhausted and defeated, and eventually drifted off to sleep. December was an absolute nightmare. My back was in terrible shape after my fall, and I had to see a doctor. They gave me some strong painkillers along with a cane. Unfortunately, the medication made me drowsy all the time. I couldn't work because of the pain, so I spent most of the month either crying over my broken marriage or rewatching Stargate SG-1. I barely ate, only occasionally snacking on crackers, and lost almost 13 pounds in just 2 weeks. My wife didn't spend much time at home during December, opting to crash at her girlfriend's place instead, but she did come over for Christmas with her friend in tow. When she saw the state I was in, with my unkempt beard, puffy eyes, and dirty clothes, she couldn't help but shed a tear or two. The room was tense as my wife and her girlfriend sat me down to have the talk. They fed me lines about moving on and still loving me, but it all sounded like bull to me. I finally found some backbone and told them I wasn't interested in being her best friend or supporting her new relationship. I was done with her and her games. The look on her face was priceless. She never expected me to stand up to her like that. With that, she walked out of my life, leaving me alone with a broken heart and a broken back. The girlfriend opened her mouth to speak, but I interrupted her with a sharp homewrecker. She didn't take it kindly and protested, but I stood my ground and told her she wasn't welcome in my house. My wife attempted to interject, but I didn't let her and demanded the homewrecker leave before we could talk any further. Eventually, the homewrecker left, and we finally sat down to have a conversation. I looked her straight in the eyes and told her that the end was near and that I was done with her. She had taken everything from me, my trust, my love, my heart. I wouldn't let her take anything else. I reminded her that the house was mine. It was my inheritance, and she had no right to it. The same went for my cars. They were gifted to me before she even came into my life. She looked shocked, as if she hadn't thought that I would fight back. But fight back I did, and I wasn't going to let her win. Her expression shifted from disappointment to pleading, as I made it clear that this was the last time we'd have a face-to-face conversation. I told her that any communication from now on would be through my attorney, no exceptions. She begged to stay in touch, but I couldn't hold back the truth about how I felt. I've been thinking about ending it all 10 times a day, I confessed to her. You were my everything, but you betrayed me, I continued. Talking to you is physically sickening, and it causes me actual pain, I added, with a hint of anger in my voice. She understood the pain I was feeling. That's where I've been, in a deep pit of despair. My mind is consumed by thoughts of her. New Year's Eve was a complete disaster. I couldn't even have a drink because of the painkillers I was taking for my back. Speaking of the painkillers, I'm almost done with them. They've made me feel terrible, and I'm desperate to return to work and do something besides lay in bed and feel sick. Update. As the new year rolled in, my wife showed up at the house to collect her things while I was present. She attempted to make small talk, but I refused to engage in any conversation with her. She looked as though she hadn't slept in days, but it was no longer my concern. During my time volunteering at a soup kitchen, I met a friend who had become homeless after a mental breakdown. As fate would have it, I had a vacant room in my house, so I offered him a place to stay. Additionally, I finally fulfilled my desire to have a furry companion and got myself a dog, something my ex-wife had always vetoed. I've been keeping busy lately. I decided to make some changes to my house to get rid of any reminders of my STB ex-wife. I tore up her garden in the backyard and set up my grilling equipment there instead. I also cleared out the attic of all our old belongings and turned it into a cozy entertainment room. I might even paint some of the walls and consider installing a jacuzzi to really relax in. It took me a couple of days to get used to my new living situation, but I'm starting to really love it. I tried going to the gym, but it just wasn't my thing. Instead, I've been going for runs and using workout apps to keep myself active. And I've decided to go lacto-vegetarian too. It's been an interesting change, but I feel like it's been good for me. I received some great suggestions from a helpful poster on my previous story regarding alternatives to my strong painkillers. So I switched to using ibuprofen and CBD oils, which have been just as effective, minus the groggy side effects. I've been attempting to distract myself by sleeping around with random women, but unfortunately I'm experiencing some issues with my little soldier. He refuses to stand at attention unless I'm thinking about my ex. I'm back at work now, and it's been a great distraction from my thoughts. However, I can't deny that my thoughts have taken a dark turn. I'm no longer mourning the loss of my relationship. Instead, I feel a seething anger when I think about it. My ex-wife robbed me of 14 years of my life, and I can never get that time back. I had an incident on February 1st that reminded me to post this update. It was 1 a.m. when I heard frantic knocking on my front door. When I opened it, there was my ex-wife. She was wearing a nightgown and no shoes, and had a black eye and bruises all over her arms. I welcomed her in and listened to her story. She revealed that she had a change of heart about moving forward with the homewrecker. She confided in me that she was frightened because the homewrecker had a pills problem. She recounted how the homewrecker became violent after she expressed her desire to take things slow. I allowed her to spend the night at my place to ensure she was safe. As of now, she's staying with her sister and has reported the incident to the police. However, that doesn't change the fact that we're still going through with the divorce. Since we have no children or shared properties, the only issue to resolve is alimony for her. Update. So, a disturbing issue involving my STB ex-wife and the homewrecker came up. She accused me of being responsible for the offense, and the police started investigating me. Fortunately, I had a solid alibi, and her story had some holes in it, which eventually led to her confessing that it was all made up. I don't know what will happen next, but it's a relief to know that I'm not involved in her mess anymore. As a result of the previous incident, I ended up losing my job, but luckily I managed to secure a new one about 3 weeks ago. While it pays a bit more than my previous job, the hours are longer and the work is more strenuous. However, things took a turn for the worse when I got into a bike accident 4 days ago. I messed up my back pretty badly and sprained my wrist, so now I'm stuck with a cast and more painkillers. I really despise these pills, but the alternatives are too costly for someone who is currently unable to work. My lawyer had some good news for me recently. After my STB ex-wife made those false allegations, it's likely that she won't be receiving any alimony from me. I have to say, that news brought a smile to my face. The emotional wounds are still fresh and I'm battling to heal. Tried therapy thrice, but no luck. It just doesn't click with me. And working out, had to give up after the accident. It was a rude awakening for me to realize how much I loathed hitting the gym. I ain't heard from my STB ex-wife in ages, and that's just the way I like it. However, her side piece, the homewrecker, is a different story. She won't leave me alone, even though I've made it clear I want nothing to do with her or her shenanigans. The worst part? She keeps creating new fake phone numbers and email accounts to pester me. It's getting old real fast, but I've got a plan. I've been saving all of her messages, just in case I need to get a restraining order to keep her crazy ass away from me. My bed life was already suffering before the bike accident. I had a brief fling with a girl in February, but we only ever met for physical closeness. However, I realized that aggressive and emotionless contact with a stranger isn't good for me, so I ended things. Since then, my bed life hasn't exactly been great. I want to give a shout out to all the people who have slid into my DMs to see how I'm holding up or to send me some good energy. You guys have helped me push through this tough patch. The divorce is coming, but I know I can get through it with the help of my friends. I never thought I would be part of this club, but I'm grateful to have such a supportive community behind me. Thanks, everyone.